Thank you all for joining us tonight. My name is Parker Davis. This is Hahamongna Native Plant Nursery's first ever Zoom class. We are presenting Planting a Native Garden in Los Angeles with our guest hosts Vanessa Wolf and Loren Johnson. Vanessa Wolf is a certified California naturalist, and her partner Loren came through the nursery last summer when they were beginning the process of selecting plants for their garden. And Tim Brick, our director, suggested that they document the process by creating a video, an instructional video, which they did, put together a great 6.5-minute video documenting the entire process of planning and designing and implementing their garden. And it's a great resource. We've been happy to share it, and I know that we've gotten a lot of great feedback on it. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the nursery, although I feel like everybody in here is, but for the sake of posterity, just in case, Hahamongna Native Plant Nursery is a project of the Arroyo Seco Foundation, a non-profit with an over 100-year history of promoting, protecting, preserving, and restoring the Arroyo Seco watershed from its source above the Switzer's Falls to its confluence with the Los Angeles River. Historically, it was the first place that native steelhead trout could make the passage up into the mountains from the Los Angeles River as they exited the Pacific Ocean looking for breeding grounds. So our mission is in a lot of ways to restore habitat for native fish and wildlife in the Arroyo Seco, and also to encourage our local community members to try to establish some habitat for pollinators and wildlife in their own backyards. And that's why we're so happy to present tonight's talk. And I guess without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Vanessa and Loren to show us their video and tell us a little bit about their project. All right, let me see how I can do that.
Thank you, Parker.
No problem. Thank you.
Yay!
So I'm Vanessa.
And I'm Loren.
I am a student at Scripps College. I went back to college after a decade working in the film industry. And I actually discovered California native wildlife while I was going back to school. And I became a certified naturalist at Pasadena City College through the UC program. And it was through going through hikes in our incredible wilderness here in Los Angeles that I really learned about native plants. And I had no idea how to plant a garden when we started. And I'll let Loren introduce himself.
Hi, I'm Loren Johnson, and I currently work in the film industry. And I've always had a keen interest in birds and wildlife. And I grew up on a farm in Minnesota, and I was always surrounded by wildlife. And living in Los Angeles, that was something that I missed, other than my hikes into the wilderness occasionally. You know, living in a suburban home or in an apartment someplace, you know, you didn't have much around you. It's just grass lawns, shrubs of, you know, various non-native types, and it wasn't a very rewarding view, you know, every day. You know, you go out and you see nothing but grass and yards and stuff like that. So I was hoping that we could establish bring a little bit of wild into our own yard, and then it went from there. We started planning.
Okay, so what we're gonna do now is show you this video, and a lot of you may have already seen it, but we're going to play it just in case someone here hasn't, so we can all kind of be on the same page of sort of the process that we went through. And you know, basically there were 4 main stages that we discovered in planting a garden. And this information is out there, but it didn't coalesce for us until we planted the garden. And it really starts with planning and getting to know your site and thinking about what kind of garden you want. Because although you can have a native garden, you know, your garden may be impacted by your particular site. in ways that you don't foresee or you don't realize. So the planning stage is really important. And then there's the prepping, which is really the hardest work. That's getting the site ready. And, you know, things can happen concurrently. You can be planning while you're prepping and then start planting and then go back and do some prepping. So things are not always linear, but in general, you're planning, then you're prepping, and then you plant. And then comes the growing, and that's where you sit back and wait and see what the plants do, what they need, who makes it, who doesn't make it, what kind of mistakes you might have made. And then you can, as you know, what we're discovering now, the garden is 18 months old now, and you know, we're seeing which combinations of plants didn't work so well, and which ones are doing really well. And so we're learning for planting a new round this fall, like
some additional
December.
I'm going to add plants.
Yeah, we'll be putting some more plants in and changing some things because some things didn't work out as well. So why don't I go ahead and start that video? But before I do, does anyone have any issues, or is anyone having any issues with the video, or any kind of technical issues, just to make sure we're all okay? Okay, if you do, you can speak up. If not, I'm going to go ahead and share the video screen. Can you see my screen and still hear me? Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. So it's 6 minutes or 6.5 minutes. Enjoy.
In 2019, we replaced our grass lawn with a California native garden. A native garden is a fantastic way to increase butterfly and bird visitors to a landscape. And native plants themselves are beautiful and adapted to the seasonal rainfall patterns of California. We know planting a garden that's also a restoration can be intimidating.
Our hope with this video is to describe the process that took our Los Angeles yard from a single crop of grass to over 40 species of native plants. There are 4 key phases in the creation of a native garden: planning, prepping, planting, and growing.
We spent 1 year observing the yard. We stopped watering the grass, which led to weeds everywhere. Nearly all were non-native invasive species. We used the app Sunseeker to figure out sun paths in the summer and winter. It turns out the east side of the house was a lot drier than the west side. This became important when we made plant selections because microclimates on a single property can have big effects on the plants. This small piece of land, before farming and then urbanization, was once a mix of chaparral and riparian habitat. We recommend calscape.org for detailed information on native plant species by zip code. We chose to stick with plants highly local to our specific area.
We watched where the rain naturally collected on the property because we wanted to collect rainwater and also direct it away from the house foundation. Next, we had to plan the garden. We made up an irrigation plan. Each zone corresponds to an area with plants that have similar water needs. We decided on moisture zones before selecting plants. At this point, we applied to the lawn removal rebate program through the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power. We recommend you go to the website of your local water district to see if there is a turf removal program in your area. Here's our stormwater retention plan. As you can see, it's not very sophisticated, but it got our application approved. We couldn't have done this garden without the lawn rebate program. It paid for the plants, rain barrels, mulch, and irrigation.
Prepping should really be called what it is: hard work. We had concrete removed and saved the big pieces for stepping stones. The old fencing we turned into mounted trellis for California wild grape. We pulled the grass out, which by the way had a root system that was still very much alive just under the surface. Contouring the land mostly consisted of digging wide trenches for rainwater collection. This is when we installed PVC pipe for the 5 irrigation zones. We installed gray water pipes from our showers and laundry. The gray water feeds a riparian area in the garden, including willows and fruit trees. According to LA guidelines, we installed a valve on the gray water system so the water can be diverted to the sewer if needed. Finally, we installed rainwater permeable hardscape in our patio area.
Now came really the best part of the whole process. We sourced plants from Hahamongna Native Plant Nursery, Theodore Payne Native Nursery, and Rancho Santa Ana Grow Native Nursery. We let the plants acclimate to our site for several days. On planting days, we filled each hole with water and let the water infiltrate the soil before setting the plants in the ground. We did not use any fertilizer or soil amendments as instructed by the nurseries. We built a berm around each shrub and hand-watered the plants until we installed drip lines. We weaved the drip irrigation through the plants, placing a single emitter at each shrub. We put a double ring of emitters around the base of each tree. Once the drip lines were in place, we knocked down the berms since they were only needed while we were hand-watering.
We used Douglas fir chips for our mulch. In some areas, we had a severe Bermuda grass infestation. Here, we laid down cardboard first to suppress the grass. We were quite discouraged by the brown carpet of mulch across our yard at first. However, we found that the mulch kept non-native weeds from coming back and kept the ground cool in the summer. In some areas, we spaced the plants too closely together. The shrubs crowded each other and struggled for space as they grew. We planted over 40 native species. Out of a total of 150 plants and trees, we lost about 15. We watered the plants through their first summer and fall, but once the winter rains came, we stopped the irrigation. We emptied the rain barrels after each of several storms into the bioswales, which were built to capture stormwater runoff.
All the rest was nature doing her thing. We hope you enjoyed watching our journey from non-native grass lawn to California native landscape. At the time of this video, the garden is a year old. We went through planning, prepping, and planting, and now the garden is growing. This was our first attempt at a native garden. There are many resources created by scientists, naturalists, gardeners, and city officials to help anyone transform their landscape into an extension of the California native ecosystem.
There we go.
Okay, we're back. I see a few claps. That's so
Applause,
sweet.
yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great video.
Thanks for. It was so good. We were thinking it would be really nice to hear some of your questions about our experience there, and kind of starting with some questions, if anyone has any, as a launching point to see where we might go tonight.
No.
Yeah, Mary Claire, I see your hand.
Hey, hi. Thank you so much. That was incredibly helpful. I've been trying to replant native wild.
So could you plant?
Sorry. So
Is the pepper tapis?
I'm
Yeah.
New furniture in the garage.
Good.
Parker, can we mute everyone except Mary?
You-
sorry.
and
I don't know.
Yes. Sorry. Who am I unmuting? Marie?
Hi. Just quickly, I've been trying to do this myself. I don't have a partner. I have some friends, but they're tired of digging holes for people and all that kind of stuff. So I'm just curious, did you do it just by yourselves, like digging those trenches? I'm also having trouble just even getting contractors to get back to me when I ask them about, like, you know, breaking up concrete. So just curious about that aspect of it.
Yeah, I engaged a landscape company that I'd used initially to help remove a few trees. And then I asked him at that time, you know, do you do earth moving and things like that? And he did. So I engaged him over a few different stages in preparing the ground to have him remove the sod and the weeds and things like that. And then I engaged him to dig some of the trenches, because the trenches are, you know, it's backbreaking work, and he had to move, you know, quite a few cubic yards of soil, which we redistributed around the yard, but it was more than I could handle and we could handle at the time. So I hired someone to do that.
Mm-hmm. And I guess, yeah, there were about 6 people working on the trenches, and it took 2 days.
2 full days, yeah, to dig the trenches that we dug.
And then, you know, we basically were like, please dig us this trench. And then once the trench was dug, we had to still do quite a bit of digging to get the sides to slope properly and to give it some shape, because you know, the trench was just this long. I think there's a picture of it in the videos. It's just a very rough thing. And then we did the lining of this, you know, we did the stonework ourselves. But we also, that helps bring up a really good point, which is we took our time. We would get a load of rocks, we'd put it in, and we'd be like, oh, we need more rocks. A couple weeks later, we might do that. And then there was an issue with the timing, because we went through the lawn rebate program. And so maybe you're not doing that, but for anyone here who's thinking about doing the lawn rebate program, it's excellent if you do have a lawn you want to remove, and we can answer questions about that too. But one of the things about it was there's a 180-day or 6-month time limit to get your garden in.
Yeah.
So we ended up having to prioritize putting plants in before our hardscaping was done completely. You know, we had the general shape, we put plants in, and then we finished hardscaping. So it was kind of like piecemeal together, but the plants didn't mind. They didn't care.
Yeah, we had to do a lot of hand watering, because we had plants in the ground before we actually had, you know, we had weeks before we were going to get the irrigation system, the drip line, and we had the underground pipes. I put that in place in about 4 or 5 days myself. But the above ground drip line that had to go into place was not quite ready until we had more of the plants in place. So I had to, we had to hand water for 2 or 3 weeks or so.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Is somebody else?
Or actually, Mary, did that answer your question?
Yes, that did. I'm planning on doing a combo myself. So that's, if I can get names of the guy that dug or the people that dug your trenches, that would be great.
Sure. Yep.
I have a couple of questions from the chat.
Yeah.
Both Amber and Maya are asking about crabgrass and grass in general, I think. And they want to know if you were successful with squashing it with the cardboard, and if there are any other tips that you have associated with that process.
So far the cardboard has been effective, right?
It has been pretty effective. We had a couple spots where it was coming out underneath the cardboard, and I went in and I aggressively dug out and got as much of the grass material out. And we actually, after we had cleared the sod off of the yard, we went through and we actually hand dug out a lot of clumps of the grass. That took some time, but then the cardboard was pretty effective.
Yeah, I mean, in that corner there where we had that infestation, we had done a hand digging and it had all come back. And we put the cardboard down and we haven't had any more. However, that crabgrass is still alive down there.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure how many years it's going to take for the root system to die. But so far it's stayed out. We haven't seen any, except the reason we know it's alive is it's growing up through the street sign. like 12 feet in the air through the stop sign,
Yeah,
and it's
there's-
like coming up the top. So we know that there's a root
Yeah,
system that's alive down there.
There's a tuft of grass at the top of the stop sign post. It's still there. It's not dead yet.
Okay, so yeah, that answers that question.
Layla asks, can you still get a rebate if the grass is already dried out for some time? Do you guys know?
So we ran into that problem. Our first application was denied because we had let weeds grow on the grass, and the program claimed that we did not have a grass lawn. So we had to show pictures of the grass when it was intact, and we wrote a letter that did convince them that that we had stopped watering the grass in order to study the site, in order to make our plan.
Yeah. But I would recommend that you submit your photos and everything in a timely manner. Don't remove the grass. Submit your photos with the grass intact, and then take it by that step, because they tell you not to remove any grass until they've approved the project. So we had grass there, but the weeds had kind of taken over everything, and the grass had dried out. So it didn't look like a grass yard. But what I did is I took a weed whacker and I went through and I cleaned everything out, and you could see that the grass was there below the weeds. So they ultimately saw it and approved us.
If your grass is already dried out, the best thing I could say is if you can find photos of it when it was green, that will help your case.
Yeah.
And the other thing you could do is water your lawn for a month, mow it, and then send that in.
Yeah.
If they really play hardball with you. But it's definitely worth a shot, and they did approve ours, so that was our experience.
Another question from Maya. What different types of soil did you guys have on your property?
We did a soil survey where we dug, I think I dug 6 different sites around the yard, and I dug about a foot down, and I removed a cup to a cup and a half of soil. We put it in mason jars, and then we filled it with water, and we just let it settle. And we found that we had kind of a loamy soil, but with some clay in it also. You could see once the soil sample settles in the water, you can see the distinct layers of sand and loam and clay, because they have different gravities in the water, and they layer accordingly. And for the most part, our yard drains pretty well. It's pretty loamy.
It's pretty loamy. We have some areas that are really compacted because they were the compacted street. So we live in a part of LA. Our street never got sidewalks or curbs in it, and the street was unpaved until only a couple of years ago. There was no asphalt either. So it was a very hard, compact dirt and / clay out in the front of where we put in the bioswales to collect the rainwater runoff off the street. That area was pretty clayey and very, very compacted.
Yeah.
The plants we have put out there, though, have been doing okay.
Mostly successful, yeah.
The hardest part was digging a hole for the plants, but once they got in the ground, those, I don't know, for some reason, they haven't had problems.
Yeah.
What species do you guys put there?
Okay, we have bladder pod,
Buckwheat.
velvet ash, buckwheat, sycamore. What else do we have out there?
We have woolly blue curls.
Woolly blue
they're
curl.
growing pretty
That's
close.
interesting because woolly blue curls, notoriously needs really well draining soil. So it's
That one's been okay there.
Yeah.
The deer weed's been okay.
When we did dig into the really hard soil, we dug an extra big hole and deeper than we needed to.
Yeah.
We normally would have, so we gave it a little extra drainage.
nice.
Um,
Marlene Yang asked, can you share more about using gray water and what that consisted of?
So we did a really low-tech solution for our gray water. It's a valve. So the water from the showers comes out of the showers under the house, comes out from out of the house. And there's a valve that we can access from the side of the house. And so we can send the water to the sewer if we need to. For example, if the water, I don't know, we use bleach or something, let's say, and we don't want that going into the garden, that can go to the sewer. But in general, we leave it just open, and it feeds a small, like, stone creek bed that we created for it. And
There's guidelines for gray water systems for the city of Los Angeles. You can
it's in,
do a
it's
Google
in the
search.
building code
it's in the
somewhere
building codes.
for the gray water. So
And
that's
the-
allowed there. Like
Yeah,
that.
and like the gray water can't be exposed on the surface. It has to be a piped below the surface, and then it has to drain into a drainage field that's filled with rock and sand, and that allows it to infiltrate into the ground. So it didn't take a lot. It wasn't a major engineering project. We installed the gray water piping when we initially remodeled the house. When we had plumbers underneath the house, that's when we asked them to put in the gray water system. We put it's called a three-way valve. So it allows you to, as Vanessa was saying, to go to the sewer, to go to the street, to go to the yard, or to shut it off.
And then, some people, we got feedback. Some people said we would have a really hard time with the salt content due to the soap. Soap is basically, it dissolves into salts in the garden. So far, we've had the gray water for 2 years, and we haven't had any issues with any kind of plant suffering. The willows out there just look amazing. They seem very happy. I will say that we only use biodegradable soaps, and we use there's a chemistry website online that gives environmental ratings on soaps. So we just use soaps that have gotten an A rating for the environment. But those still are going to make the water pretty saline. But so far our riparian plants, which is what we have, riparian and fruit trees on the gray water, they are doing fine so far.
Yeah, we selected.
But as
riparian.
not an arborist, I don't want to make any official statements on that.
Great. Kimberly asks, I'm interested in why no soil amendments were added. Pasadena's soil is very clay heavy and difficult to work with. Can you say more about that?
That's maybe because we had a loamy soil. It wasn't so difficult other than being dry and compact.
Yeah, we didn't, and also native plants don't need, if you're amending the soil in order to increase fertilization or to put bioavailable material in the soil, a lot of the native plants don't need nutrients, really. Whatever is naturally in the soil is all they really need. Fertilization can actually cause damage to most of the native vegetation that grows in our area.
That's what we were told too.
That's what we were told too, and that's kind of been our experience. We use no amendments when we worked the soil and did the planting, and we have not added any fertilizers or amendments to the soil since then. And the plants have done phenomenally well.
And I can add to that I have clay soil on my property with very poor drainage, and what I've done is just found native plants that from my area that tolerate clay soil, and they've all done really well. So that's kind of what I recommend people do versus trying to amend their soil.
That's a really important part, Parker. Even for us, when we were figuring out this garden, we had to really at some point also realize that it wasn't really us imposing our will on the land. It was more like trying to figure out what the land wanted. So we happen to be on a site that has a certain kind of soil that really supports this wide variety of chaparral plants. But some people are going to be on a clay soil or have a really rocky slope that's going to change their plant selections. And that's okay. That's awesome, because you're going to get the animals that want to live in that environment as well.
Yeah.
It's a good thing.
Yeah, you have to pick plants that are going to fit with the ground you have. It's not the ground you wish you had, it's the ground you have. And then you do some research on Calscape and some other nursery sites and stuff like that, and figure out what would work best in the soil that you have. I think that's the best approach.
Yeah. All right, Caleb says, I got my rebate approved with all dead turf, but I noted on my application that I stopped watering it a few months prior.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
good.
How long does it take for rebate app approval? My rebate was approved in 5 days, Caleb says. Wow. How about you guys?
The approval for us to go ahead with the work took about 5 to 8 days, somewhere in that range. It's been a while. And then once we had completed the work, we took almost the entire 180 days. So by the time we got close to our deadline, we were putting the finishing touches on our yard. I took a bunch of photos and we submitted them, near the deadline. And within 2 weeks, I got a check back for several $1,000s based on our lands, on our square footage of our yard.
All right. Oops. Sorry, I got lost here. All right. Somebody asked to provide a link to the video. Layla asked to provide a link to the video that was played. I'm going to put that in the chat right now. Okay. Can you speak more about how you chose plants for different watering zones? Can you speak more about your irrigation system and how it's set up for different hydro zones? Look like there are 5 about, question mark.
Talk about the irrigation.
Yeah, so that was also a rocky process. If you can figure out your watering zones before putting in plants, that will help you a lot, definitely. But it can be done afterwards as well. So basically there's like 4 main categories that we had, which was, we have dry shade plants, wet shade, dry full sun plants, and wet full sun plants, right? So basically, when we picked a moisture zone, within a particular moisture zone, we might have some shade and sun as well to work with. Sometimes we made some mistakes. Like, for example, we had a dry area that is very sunny, and we put dry shade plants in that sunny area, thinking, oh, they're dry, they'll do well. And there was too much sun there. So, even though, so one thing you're going to do is, or one thing we did was create the moisture zones, and we have 5 of them. But of those 5 moisture zones, we basically have only one of them is super wet, and that corresponds with the area near our gray water. So we have this riparian area that we can add more water if we need to. For example, if we, for some reason, stopped using laundry or shower, took a trip, we could still water that area because they will need water. And then we have the trees. All of the trees were on their own zone, and that's because the trees are going to need a lot more water than the natives, than the shrubs, excuse me. And so that's like the sycamores, the cottonwood, the velvet ash, and the baby oak trees. Now, oaks and sycamores need different amount of water, but when they're young right now, so the oaks need that water, and we put fewer emitters on the oaks and more on the sycamores. So the sycamores will get more water than the oaks do.
Yeah. So I don't know if you're familiar with drip lines, but we used a drip line by a company by the name of Netafim. It's an Israeli company, and they have this really beautifully designed drip line that has emitters that are rated at different gallons per hour, and you can go from like 0.3 gallons up to I think 1.2 gallons per hour by purchasing 100-foot or 200-foot lengths of this drip line in various categories. And then we just looked at what we thought our needs would be, and we settled in at a 0.9 gallons per hour for drip, and that's for each emitter. Each emitter on the drip line will emit 0.9 of a gallon in 1 hour. So for most of the native plants, we put one emitter about 5 to 6 inches away from the base of the plant. You don't want to put it right up next to the plant because it can introduce rot. So you want to put it a little bit away and kind of make the roots of the plant work for the water, so that the water is not immediately readily available. It's there, but the plants have to kind of search for it too, so that, because they're a chaparral, plant. They don't need water like on top of them.
And I will say also, you don't have to do drip irrigation in your garden. Like overhead sprinklers work as well, and you can still have your moisture zone.
One thing though, if you do apply for the rebate, that is a requirement.
Okay.
A drip line is a requirement for the actual rebate through the Metropolitan Water District and LADWP. But if you're not going to go for the rebates, you can put overhead sprinklers in if you want. It's just it's one of the requirements that they have.
Or not use irrigation, in my opinion. But
Or not use irrigation.
That's a
yeah.
possibility
Yeah.
too. One thing about our, when in the summer, this first summer that the plants went through, they got really haggard looking without irrigation. And I'm pretty sure we would have got a notice from the fire department if everything had gone brown. So that's something to think about too. Like if you're going to let your garden go fully brown and go fully summer dormant,
Yeah.
you may need to do some trimming. And so consider that as well. Because you don't want to get you don't want to have a fire risk.
Good point.
Yeah.
All right. What fruit trees did you guys plant?
Oh, we put in, we had one existing peach tree on the property when we purchased the home, and we left that. Otherwise, we added a small white nectarine. I can't remember the species name, but a small nectarine, a Persian lime, a couple of pomegranate trees, and I think that's it. Yeah. Yeah.
Are they doing pretty well?
They're doing very well. We put all of those trees are in our riparian area, which is fed by the gray water, and then additional drip lines too. So we're making sure that they're growing well.
Yeah, they're high water. And then at the base of those plants, we're putting those plants that like the natives that like wet shade.
Yeah.
Like a Juja hedge nettle. That's doing really well at the base of the pomegranate. So we're still trying to get some natives in there among those fruit trees.
Yeah.
From Jenny, just curious to know which plants didn't work for you guys and why you think they didn't make it.
That's a good question.
So far we have had, our Yerba Santas have not made it, but I think that's because they were really roughly transplanted.
Yeah.
We never got a good starter plant for the Yerba Santas.
Yeah.
They did not handle the transplant well.
Yeah, they didn't like the root systems being roughed up very much. They're very sensitive, it seems.
What else? We had 2 out of 3 deer weeds didn't make it. I don't know why. Exactly the same conditions. One is holding on really well. The others both dried out. Maybe was dormant, but then someone pulled it out. So what else? What else didn't make it? Golden currant really struggled because we planted that in full sun, which is how I've seen it growing out in on the trails in Gabrielino, on the Gabrielino Trail at times. Like I've seen golden currant in the sun, but it just got baked.
Yeah.
So it didn't work here. So there's another in the shade that's doing better.
It might suffer more from the heat island effect too, and living in an urban
That's
area.
True. We have,
where it will survive in full sun out in the wild and along a trail, it may not survive here in the urban area, in the urban kind of our urban wild area.
That's a good point too. In fact, this is sort of a tangent, but just the other day we had an arborist come by and was talking to somebody else at the nursery about doing a planting in a high traffic area. And she mentioned that in a zone with a lot of cars traffic passing by, it creates more wind, which creates more drying. Mm-hmm. And I thought it was interesting because since then I've been taking some drives just sort of up and down the Arroyo. And I've noticed that there's this line along the foliage of the oak trees where it really abruptly stops. And to me, it seems like it's about where the wind passes by from the passing traffic, and all the leaves below it are really, really beat from the heat wave in the last couple of months, that we've had. Yeah. And I think they were affected most by it because they're extra dried out from the traffic passing by. So anyway, it's another thing you have to think about, I guess. Anyway. Sorry to get off on a tangent.
Lots of little things to take into consideration for your plants.
Yeah.
And I want to speak to the possibility that these plants also have volition, and they may not choose to stay. Some may choose to be there and some may not. And it might be an odd way to think about it. And it might be true. And that's worth thinking about too, that,
Yes.
Yeah.
Adding to that, were there any plant combos that particularly worked or did not work for you?
Well, we found that the mugwort is pretty aggressive. It overtook an area that we kind of thought would be kind of our wetter area, and we were watering it as well.
Don't put mugwort on water,
Yeah.
near water, unless you want a lot of
mugwort. We ended up removing. Vanessa had to go in. I was at work one day, and she went in with a sifter. She dug through all the soil, pulled all the little rhizomes from the mugwort out, and sifted that out of the soil and cleaned it up. Which ultimately it got rid of the mugwort.
Yeah, and then the other plants did much better in that area.
Yes.
They were not going to make it with the mugwort. So I made a decision on there. And we have mugwort in a more dry area, sunny dry area, and we don't water it, and it does very well. It's contained and it looks much more natural. As well. Yeah. We had a white sage that didn't make it, and it was planted among California sagebrushes. Should have been fine. Just didn't
want to go there. Yeah.
What other combinations?
Well, we had.
I will also say that all the hybrid species that we planted when we didn't really know what we were doing in the first month that we bought plants, they all died.
Yeah.
So we didn't have any success with hybrids, and I'm fine with that.
Yeah. We bought a few. We were just out of ignorance. We bought a few hybrids. We looked at them. And we go, oh, that's a nice plant, and it says that it's a California native. Well, it turned out it was, but it wasn't native to the Arroyo Seco, the area that we live in. So they're really sensitive to microclimates, it seems.
Yeah, for anyone who doesn't know about the website Calscape, I didn't know about it. I think we learned about it from Portia at Hahamongna only on like the second or third month we were into the project. It's really worthwhile. Calscape.org. You enter your zip code, and just by planting local, I think is part of why we've had some of the success we've had. Because I don't particularly think that before this garden I had a green thumb in any way.
There's really an encyclopedia of information almost around each plant. If you can really drill down and figure out the water needs and the soil and what the morphology of the plant's going to be like, we planted some of the plants too close together, which we talked about in the video, and they crowd each other, and then one plant's going to lose out. They're kind of competing for space and moisture and sunlight. And we made a mistake there in a few areas, which we remedied ultimately, but you have to be really careful. You should really know what the morphology of the plant is, the size of the plant, and how tall it's going to be before you put it in the ground, or before you make the decision even to buy it. Because once you've purchased it and you've stuck it in the ground, 2 years from now, it might be 10 feet high and 15 feet wide. And it might not work where you planted it.
Or it might be exactly what you need.
It might be exactly what you need too, yeah.
That's great. Mary Claire asks, how much is rebate per square foot?
I would suggest that you go on if you live in Los Angeles, you go into the LEDWP's website or the Metropolitan Water District. The best place is to go to Be Water Wise, and then they will connect you to the various rebates that are available for your area or region or city. And that's run, the Be Water Wise is run by the Metropolitan Water District.
Do you remember what ours was?
Ours at the time, when I initially applied, it was $2 a square foot. And then shortly after my approval, they sent me another email and they said, the city of Los Angeles, I think, it's kind of foggy now, but I think the city of Los Angeles added another $1 per square foot. So we ended up getting $3 per square foot for our.
But of course, that price might have changed now.
Yeah, it depends on funding. Like right now with everything's going on with state governments and stuff, you may want to. The money's probably there, but they might be changing it.
Maya asks, how often do you water?
That's a good
Okay,
point.
so in this heat, in the last 2 months, we've watered the fruit trees in the riparian area once a week. We water the.
And that's for that's about 2 to 3 hours per watering. So they're getting
their full dose. So
Yeah.
each tree is getting its
20
This is through the drip,
20
obviously.
gallons.
20 gallons of water.
What's that,
roughly.
Parker?
This is through the drip.
Through the drip.
Through the
So
drip,
we're doing
yeah.
drip, but if you did sprinklers or hand watering, you would just, whatever you've allocated for that plant. For us, the riparian areas are getting once a week. And then the sycamores and other trees, the oaks, sycamores, cottonwood, and ash tree, they're getting it every 2 weeks. They're getting a deep water. And then our chaparral, which is the remaining 3 zones, are all split up among chaparral. We've been watering those.
Once a month.
Watered them once a month, but in this last heat wave, we went to every 3 weeks. So the last one was at the 3-week mark, and now we're going to water again at the 3-week mark. So we're increasing it now at this time of year, because some of the plants were looking very stressed, and we got worried, and we're not sure if we can let them go or not, and so we're going to water them, and we'll see what happens next year.
Yeah. I'm a very nervous weather watcher. I'm always checking to see when the next heat wave's coming. So, then I tell her, and then she looks at the app, and then we set up a watering.
But, even with the once a month, so in that chaparral zone, we have a lot of buckwheat, and the buckwheat was absolutely fine with the once a month. If we could have gone back in time, we wouldn't have put buckwheat on any kind of the same line as maybe any kind of currant, any kind of ribes species. We would have had separate from the buckwheat. That's something maybe to think about if you can, but that being said, the buckwheat is tolerating every 3 weeks. We've been told buckwheat doesn't tolerate regular summer water, so we're trying to be careful with that.
Yeah, you don't want to. It might be better to air slightly, except for doing like extraordinary heat waves. It might be better to air with a little less water for the chaparral plants than too much in the summertime.
Oh, and the other thing is when we do water, we water really deeply.
Yeah.
So when I say we're watering once a month, each of those chaparral plants is getting 10 gallons of water. Like it's a deep water and then nothing.
Yeah. That seems to work pretty well.
So far, I'll show you. I have actually some photos of the garden in the fall. It has a lot more texture now.
I'd love to see that.
Yeah. I just took them yesterday because I was like, oh, we might need those.
Another question. How long did it take for the plants to grow in and fill in the space? That's from Caleb.
Okay. Well, the plants generally, they grew quite quickly. Even over we went against some of the rules. We planted probably 2/3 of our plants in the heat of the summer, which almost all of the native plant websites tell you don't do that. Plant them in the fall, in the winter, and give them time to establish themselves. Because of our time frame and things going on in our life at the time, we decided to just go ahead and push on, knowing that we're probably going to lose, 20 or 30%.
Low on time.
Okay. And then we just went ahead and planted anyway. And it turns out that the plants with hand watering and then regular drip line watering did survive. And then they grew fairly quickly, much faster than I thought. There's a rule or a saying is that the first year they sleep, the second year they creep, and the third year they leap. Well, they just basically went from sleep to leap. They just exploded in the first winter of rain. The plants just grew like crazy.
We also had a really wet
winter.
We had
a pretty wet winter, yeah. So here's some of the photos that Vanessa has pulled up. I'm going to share.
So this, Parker, can you guys see it?
Yep.
Okay, so, we have, in this area, we've got some buckwheat, woolly blue curls, purple sage, black sage.
Hooker's evening primrose.
That's in the back, you can't see it.
Yep.
And then
Encelia,
quail bush, which is going to get huge, didn't belong there. We'll see if it makes.
Yeah.
And then we have a mountain mahogany, very slow growing, but at some point that mountain mahogany will be the focal point of that area. You can see that the California sagebrush is quite dry now. The sage, the white sage, is looking beautiful. The wands have all dried up, but the birds are still eating seeds out of the wands.
That's
Another of that. You can see that our golden currant on the right there is next to this is not doing. I don't think it's going. It's bad. I think it's summer dormant right now. That path. I saw a question about the path. We did lay DG on the path, but a very, very thin layer on that. And it was because we were getting a lot of dust from just the raw dirt. So we put the DG down to keep the dust down.
Yeah, and the DG did. It helped considerably. It was kicking up so much dust. Our soil, when it dries out, is very powdery. It dries out and becomes very powdery. So
the coyote brush was a really fast grower in our garden, for whatever reason. But now other plants are starting to catch up, so they're not dominating as much.
And we may have to shape them over time.
You can see that there's definitely some dryness now showing up, but of course that gives some texture to the garden, which is really nice. That's the coyote bush in bloom. Let's see. And we have California fuchsia. It's looking a little scraggly, but we have a resident hummingbird who defends this territory against
very aggressively, and she chases all comers away.
So she's very happy with the California fuchsia, and as well. Then we have this bladderpod. And we're going to plant more bladderpod. It's a really great plant for pollinators.
While you guys are going through these slides, maybe you can talk also a little bit more to these questions. There's a couple more questions left, just a couple.
Parker, please go ahead.
One is, have you noticed any interesting pollinators visiting your plants, which is why I threw that in there because you just mentioned the hummingbird. Mm-hmm. And then also trimming back because you also sort of mentioned it with the coyote brush. Have you trimmed anything else back at all? Is there anything else you might think you might trim back? Anyway, while you're going through it, maybe talk about those things.
For trimming, we haven't done a lot of trimming and we don't know what to do about that.
Yeah.
This is an uncharted territory for us, so I don't think we can speak to trimming yet.
Yeah. A little bit here and there, just to keep plants out of our pathways and things like that, but no major trimming at all so far. We're kind of letting the plants do what they want to do. As far as pollinators go, we've had an explosion of pollinators.
Massive.
It just a tremendous change. We went from having primarily just European honeybees and maybe some others that we didn't notice, but now the plants have such a variety of bees and wasps, from almost microscopic to quite large insects. We've had carpenter bees show up, other types, and another type of black bee.
Wasps.
A lot of wasps.
And these are all not native bees. They're non-stinging bees, and they're incredible to watch. The activity was incredible in the spring and early summer.
Yeah, when a lot of we planted a lot of our native plants bloom at different times. So we go out and every day or every week or so, there's something new coming out or changing, and we notice different insects and birds coming around.
So this might be also to the one who asked about how long it took for these to grow. Keep in mind that right now we're at the end of their second summer. These plants the oldest plants are 18 months old.
And you can see how much they've grown. When we planted them,
the tree is more than we bought the tree. It was already a little older.
It was a little older, yes. Yeah. But the shrubs, for the most part, most of them we bought in 1 gallon and
1 gallon
or 1 gallon pots, and they've just taken off.
So here's an example. This is Yerba Mansa. It's a stream bed plant, and it can only go here because we've got this riparian line that gets a lot of water. So that's an example of us trying to plant some things and using the water that we've already got moving through the space.
It's also a shaded area too. It's mostly in shade most of the day. It gets a little bit of noontime sun.
What's that vine?
Oh, that's a desert wild grape.
Yep.
Beautiful.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And we planted that in,
That was
That was a
later.
later
Yeah, that was
planting.
planted in July of 2019.
How much sun does it get there?
That's also a kind of a shaded area. It has our
It gets
house on
shaded
one
there.
side and then another house that the houses sit very close together right there.
it gets about 3 hours of direct sun.
Yeah, overhead.
But this grape, the same species, gets
Probably
7 or 8 hours.
Yeah, 7 to 8 hours a day. Yeah.
So it's very tolerant. It's tolerant of a pretty good range of sun and shade.
And we don't give them much water at all. Yeah.
And those are the willows.
Yeah, the willows when we planted them were maybe 10 inches tall in the pot, and we can see what they're at now. They're
Yeah, I had no idea.
20
We had no idea.
Yeah, we may have made a mistake there.
No, they're wonderful.
They are beautiful, and they attract a tremendous amount of bird life, and also
Butterflies.
and some really unique wasps that we're not sure what they are yet, but we'll figure it out.
And then lastly, I know we're almost out of time here. This is the mule fat, and mule fat gets a really bad rap because it can look kind of scraggly, but we found that it's a really good plant for narrow, where you want a tall plant that's a little narrow. It's been tolerating cutting very well. So we've cut it to allow for this little path back here, and it's been very tolerant of that, and it's a very happy plant.
Yeah.
So, and the mule fat is a favorite of pollinators as well.
Yeah. Yep. We get tremendous.
And birds.
And birds.
And birds, a lot of birds.
Okay.
And they're right outside our kitchen window.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you guys so much. That was amazing. I have a couple more questions. It looks like real quick. They're both on the subject of mulch. Is that just somebody else is asking about the path in your garden again. Is that just dirt from the old lawn that wasn't mulched?
No, so I mean, it was just dirt, and then
Yes.
there's a thin layer of DG,
Yeah, we put
decomposed
about
granite.
an inch of decomposed
Granite.
granite.
A whole inch.
Where did you guys get your decomposed granite?
I'm sorry?
Where did you guys source your decomposed granite?
That I because we didn't put much down, I purchased that from Home Depot.
Right.
A lot of the other rocks we got from like a specialty rock yard, which you can find online. There's many different places that sell, but because we had so much material, I just paid delivery fees and had them drop off pallets full of rock and dump sand and pebbles and different things that we needed.
We also got a lot of rocks from just neighbors and people who didn't want them. We're like, we don't want these. We're like, we'll come and get them.
We took a wheelbarrow and went over and collected rocks. And also we had the city digging up the street in our neighborhood. And because we live in the arroyo,
There was just a ton of rocks that they were going to take to the landfill.
They were
and we're
going to,
like, just give us some.
they removed them and they were putting new piping in, and they had piles of rocks. And we just went over there. I made several trips with a wheelbarrow, and we probably picked up a couple tons of rocks right there.
So we have more rocks than we can really afford.
Yeah.
That's the lesson of that story.
So we were lucky enough
Hopefully
to
you get lucky too.
get some free rocks.
Nice.
Because they're expensive.
All right, last question is from Jessica. This is a great question to end this, I guess, if you guys are comfortable sharing anyway. Do you mind if we ask what your budget was and how much your rebates covered?
Yeah.
No, I don't mind, because I think it gives you an idea of what you may be looking at. I think overall, not including some of the fencing and different things, but just the planting and the materials and we put in some hardscape, some permeable hardscape. I think that in grand total was about $16,000.
I don't think it was that high.
It wasn't that high? Okay.
No.
No, it was less than that?
Mhm.
Okay. But we
Because we also built a porch. So.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Some of that may have included that too. I don't know.
But the city rebate was $6,000.
Yeah.
And then the garden was at least $10,000.
Yeah, at least 10,000. And then we got about 6,000. It's based on the square footage that you reclaim. We removed one driveway. Our property had 2 driveways, and one of them was just like a parking area. So we removed that. That opened up more square footage for the rebate. If you take concrete out, they'll rebate that too.
I would say the highest ticket items were the hardscaping.
Yeah.
So because we went for so many rocks,
Yeah.
and the pavers that we put down.
Yeah.
In terms of the plants, I think we spent under $2,000 on the plants.
Yeah.
And the mulch was about $3,000. So
yeah, we put a lot of mulch
the
down.
rebate covered the mulch
Yeah.
and the sprinkler system.
Yeah.
And
some of the plants.
Some of the plants.
Yeah. Yep.
Awesome.
Yeah.
You
So
guys are
it
getting
definitely was pricey. But I really hate the idea of anyone thinking that they can't put in a garden if they don't have a budget.
Yeah.
Because if you can budget for plants and mulch, there's a lot you can do with that.
Yeah.
And the mulch is pretty important for keeping those non-native weeds down.
And you may have an existing sprinkler system that's been installed already for your lawn, and you can adapt that instead of digging it up and changing it all over, which is what we had to do because our sprinkler system was so old and broken up from the previous homeowner just didn't take care of it. So we had to completely establish a new system. But if you have an existing system, that can be adapted to drip lines.
You can put an adapter
You can put
on
adapters
the
on
tops,
them.
and so that can also
That
save,
can save
a lot
you
of
some
work
money.
and money.
Yes, yep. And the drip line just lays on the ground. You can put it under the mulch, but you lay it on top of the soil itself. And there are a lot of websites that'll show you. And also some of the Landscape Warehouse was very helpful. The guy helped me. I went in and asked questions, and he showed me different systems, and there's a lot of people out there that are very willing to answer questions if you have them.
Great. Well, thank you guys so much. That was amazing. You guys are getting tons of kudos in the chat. I don't know if you guys have that window open, but there are lots of compliments.
Thank you. Yep.
All saying thank you. This is great info. Awesome. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing. So inspiring. I need to water more effectively. Your garden is so beautiful. Great info. This is so awesome. Appreciate it.
We do.
And I really appreciate you guys too. Thank you so much. This is an amazing first Zoom meeting for the nursery. We'd love to have you guys back sometime. If you guys are willing to do another sort of segment on this sort of.
In planting season sometime.
Sounds great. That'd be awesome. We'd love to have you back. And thank you everyone in the audience for sticking it out with us. We had a nice group show up. I know it was very short notice, so I really appreciate everybody coming out and participating in the chat. And thank you for all of your wonderful questions and comments in the.
Thank you all so much.
Yes, thank you. Yep.
I so appreciate it. I'm really looking forward to meeting some of you, all of you, one day.
At the nursery, or yeah.
Yes. Come by the nursery sometime this weekend. We're open tomorrow through Sunday, 9 a.m. through 3 p.m. We have lots of native plants in stock for everybody that's starting their gardens right now. With the weather cooling down a little bit, this is a great time to start planting. So we hope we see you all soon. And yeah, hopefully we get another one of these meetings going again in the next couple of weeks as well, because we want to do more of this kind of stuff.
I just hope it was helpful. If
Yes.
anybody learned
So
anything,
helpful.
that's the goal.
Oh, it was awesome. Everybody loved it.
Good
Thank you
education.
so much.
Great.
You guys did a great job. Thank you guys. Thanks everybody for coming. We'll see you guys soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.